Welcome to the Deconstructed Woman podcast, a podcast about breaking down barriers between women, exploring and sharing perspectives of each individual woman's experience, and discovering what we have in common and what makes us different. Hosted by Elisa Marie and Joji.
Welcome back to another episode of The Deconstructed Woman. Today we have the honor of talking to Lori Pappas. She's got a new book out called The Magic of Yes, Embrace the Wise Woman Within. And we are so excited to welcome her to our podcast because she is the encapsulation of what we'd like to talk about on this podcast. So welcome, Lori.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, it's wonderful. And so tell us a little bit about your journey and what ended with this book, like in short form maybe, but just so interesting to find out what road you've been on.
It really is interesting because writing this book is my big supposed to. And it's the big obligation that I have because I really feel that a lot has been invested in me. And I was one of those people that has been very lucky. Sure, I suffered some profound childhood abuse, but I grew up with nutrition. I grew up with the access to education. I always knew that I was smart and that I could figure things out. So that's a huge advantage as a young child to know that you have the innate intelligence to be able to figure it out. All you have to do is use the gifts that you have. And so as I was on my journey, I had that wonderful assurance to fall back on. And when I was 17 years old, I realized that I had to take charge of my life. If I was going to survive and to make something out of it, I had to build that life step by step. And I took that responsibility. And I found that rather exciting because now you really can be the creator of who you want to be. And I dealt with the abuse, I think, by disassociating. It was like, oh yeah, this happened. Okay, get over it, move on. And yes, that did create a shell. And I had a harder time relating to close relationships. But it also protected me. And I was able to really focus on what it was that I wanted to get done. It gets rather convoluted, but I've had just an amazing journey. I was really lucky to start my software company right at the right time, right when it was the advent of the microcomputer. I managed to get into a market that really needed my product. Because I didn't have any money, I was able to be a pioneer in telesales and webinars and all of that because I didn't have an option. I never was able to finish college, which also was an advantage because I never had to follow the rules of academia. But it really gave me the freedom to branch out and try things because I didn't know any better. I could just focus on whatever that goal was. And then when I was 49, I sold my business for enough money to retire. But I failed. I failed retirement. It was just so boring. Oh my God.
Before we get into your life, can I ask you a question? Because what I'm wondering is that do you think that the first time you heard that wise woman was then at age 17? Do you think she was whispering to you?
She might have been whispering to me, but I don't know that I was listening to her intentionally. I think that I definitely have been guided. I don't know that in this particular podcast we want to go into this. I'm one of these that knows that I'm reincarnated and I've got all this old wisdom in my body. But I don't think at that age I knew that. I don't think I really realized it until I was living alone in Africa. And at night, A lot of times we wouldn't have electricity. I'd be by myself. And so I'd think. And that was the first time I really was able to just think because I didn't have any options. I couldn't do anything other than think. And being an overachiever and somebody that always was doing things, being forced to just sit there and reflect. And then, of course, I was working with very marginalized people that on the outside look like they would be really primitive. They're the people that you see in National Geographic. But I could see their innate wisdom in them. So it made me start thinking about all these things. And that then became the genesis of my book. Quite frankly, the most important thing to me isn't, yeah, I'd like to sell some books because I am an overachiever and all that other crap. But at the end of the day, I really want to inspire women. I spent the first 50 years of my life making money for men. And now I figured that this next 50 years, I'm going to do it for women. And then the last 27 years, it'll just be for everybody. This is my half a century that's focused on women. And we really have advantages. We really do. Even though we live oftentimes in a man's world, we're the ones that really were born to multitask. We're the ones that are the nurturers, which means that we have more of a natural ability to feel empathy and to walk in somebody else's shoes. That's more our wiring. And that's a great advantage. It is. It really is a great advantage. It's just a matter of learning how to tap into that power that we have.
Yep. And I stopped you from talking to us about what you did after you sold your business. And I cut you off right before Africa. So please walk us through that.
So I sold my business. We moved out to the Seattle area and lived in this beautiful house. I planted a garden with 3,000 plants, once again, overachieving because why not? And I tried to play golf and they have little balls so little, that stick is so skinny. And then I thought, it doesn't make sense for me. I did volunteer work, but I realized at the time that even though I was an effective leader, I really sucked as a follower. And that becomes an issue for me because I really want things to be efficient and for everything to maximize effort and all of that. And in volunteer organizations, sometimes that's difficult. So I started doing strategic marketing consulting and traveled a lot, traveled all over the world. And I was in Niger and a little girl came up to me and she had flies on her face. And she just happened to be the same age as my granddaughter, probably about 6 at the time. And the unfairness just devastated me because my wonderful little Ella did nothing special to be born my granddaughter. And yet she was born then with these advantages. And this little girl did nothing wrong to be born into this disease-ridden hardship of a life. So I decided right then I was either going to grow my consulting business and give all my money away, or I was going to work for free. And since I was bored, why not work? And one thing after another, I ended up in the South Omo Valley of Ethiopia, which is right in the corner of South Sudan and Kenya and Ethiopia. And it's an extreme hardship area. And it's an area where land is being taken away by the government to lure investment. People that have survived by following their livestock don't have a livelihood. And they're ancient tribes that have so much ancestral wisdom. And I decided that I was going to figure out how to give them a chance to have a healthy life. I started a NGO, a nonprofit, because I figured I'd had a successful for-profit business. So what's the big deal? It's a big deal. It was really difficult. But we ended up having about 50 employees. We helped about 100,000 people. We got money from USAID and the UK and the EU and Boeing and a lot of Rotary clubs and so forth. And We did water, sanitation, hygiene, health, functional adult literacy, women's empowerment, environmental. And I figured it out. I figured out how they could have a chance to have a healthy life. But then conflict really took over the country and it became unsafe for me. And plus, I had figured it out. And at 67, my daughter talked me into online dating. And so I was in Ethiopia and I got matched with the love of my life who lived in Mexico. And I thought, what the hell? And even though I had sworn I was never, ever going to get in another relationship. And so here we are almost 9 years later, happy. And it's great. So it took me 7 years to recover, though, from my time in Africa to get enough energy to write the book. And I didn't want to. I didn't grow up wanting to be a writer. And I've always been a doer. And now here I've written this book is all about being, not doing. But I've got this reputation as a doer. And so it's fascinating to me to watch myself try to transform from this competitor, give 'em hell Harry kind of woman to this compassionate, wise woman. But it's fun. And I've always loved to help people. And it seems to be working.
I was going to jump in because I wanted you to also high achiever and somebody who's always doing things. You said I'm becoming more of being rather than doing. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I think there's a lot of people out there who hear that and think, I don't know what the difference is, what that looks like.
I think probably one of the starkest comparisons is find inner peace. How you feel. Well, here's a great little story. Over in Addis, living in Addis, most of the time in Addis Ababa, it's noisy. It is so noisy. It's just overwhelming. And I had received a mantra from my shaman that said that I was praying to be an endless source of peace, love, and harmony. So I would ask myself, how can I be a source of peace, love, and harmony when I just want to go shoot all those people and get them to be quiet? What does that look like? How can I transition from somebody that just wants to make this everything to be quiet so I can have peace, love, and harmony? That a little bit of a contradiction there. And so I started thinking about what does love really look like? If I want to be a source of love, what am I trying to be a source of? Or what am I trying to be a source of when I talk about harmony or any of that? And that opens a whole different way of thinking. And so what's interesting to me when I was writing my book, yeah, I knew that I had to include my story in there to make points and all of that. But what gave me the biggest thrill was when at the very end, I put in these little vignettes of all these extraordinary, ordinary women that represent what my message was. And I love doing that. And that's why I started then writing my newsletter, which is called Sticky Thoughts. And it's all about extraordinary, ordinary women that followed a certain path based on the cards they were dealt to find their peace. Because, face it, a lot of people aren't going to escape to Africa to get rid of their second marriage, like I did.
And I want to say that the universe works in funny ways. This morning, I saw a card that I haven't seen in years because all my clothes have been piled on top of it. And when I went to San Francisco, I visited the Zen Center in San Francisco, and I bought this card that hangs in my bedroom that says, do something, just sit there. That's the Buddhist way of saying, stop doing stuff, take time and go inward, because that's really where the work is. So when you said that, I thought, oh, I know exactly where that comes from, because those of us who are overachievers, we get quick satisfaction from getting something done. But the hardest
We
thing to
do.
do is to just sit with yourself and just be, right? Because we're not
Mhm.
getting that automatic reinforcement of being busy, doing something. And one of the things that I've learned about myself is that quiet is the hardest sound to bear. Because when you're busy doing stuff, you feel productive, you feel like you're accomplishing something. But when you are alone with yourself and your thoughts, that is what is the most difficult because
Yeah.
of the traumas that we all have, right? And those
Mhm.
things
Mhm.
start to come back to us. And when we're really busy, we can keep them at bay. But
Mhm.
when we're alone
Mhm.
with them, you have to do something with them. If you're not busy, they're going to surface. And unless you stay busy, they're going to be present. And so I think that when you said it, I completely understood what you were saying because I lived that path myself. And it has become a real discipline to tolerate that quiet and to understand that might be a harder part of my journey than just doing. Because as much as it looks successful to the outside world, it's not personally successful because we have these things we have to resolve.
Exactly. And the thing that I did leave out in that story was, so I sold my business at 49 and I started my nonprofit, must have been about, I was maybe 56. And in that period of time, I did a lot of personal work and a lot of therapy. And I dealt with the abuse that I'd had. And I reprogrammed that. And I rejected my family's shame-based family system and their belief system, which was really traumatic because even though I didn't believe it, you do believe it because that's how you're programmed. And going through that, I think, is what really made me successful in Ethiopia because I would sit there looking at these elders and these people, and they didn't have food to eat. They weren't in a safe environment. And I was asking them to give up their belief system to follow my belief system in regard to sanitation and water and all those different things. And I was just in awe of really how desperate they were, which caused them to then do what we suggested. But how much courage it takes to move on. And it takes courage to face your past. And, I did all that inner child work, which I think is so important because that's then what allows you to have peace and to really embrace that wise woman within.
And what did that, when you became quiet and you went inward, what was the process of discovering that wise woman? What is your relationship with her today?
I have to say, it was just what a relief. I mean, it really is. It's really a relief to know that you're carrying that wisdom with you wherever you are. And all you need to do is just be still and ask for help. And when you ask for help, you need to be willing to receive the help and then act on that advice. Or all of those are difficult. But one thing I was going to respond to when I was listening to some of your previous podcasts, and I listened to the one about aging, and I thought, oh my goodness, I don't, I love my age. I'm 75 years old. I think it's a hoot. I think it's absolutely a hoot because 75 is supposed to be old. And yeah, I'm creaky, but the benefit is phenomenal because you've got all this experience and you've got all these wonderful thoughts and you have this ability to, it's really a freedom. It's a tremendous freedom. And it's the best time of my life. And I found that Yeah, the thing I'm enjoying the most about this time right now is talking to all you wonderful women and writing stories about them and learning the journeys. And I'm gobsmacked. I'm always surprised at the tremendous strength and uniqueness and resilience. And it makes me so proud to be a woman. And I never would have thought that. I never would have thought that. My generation, I was one of the first women to really make some money and sell computers and all of that. And so back when I was in my 20s and 30s, I would have people saying, "Oh, you need to help me because you're here and I'm not." And I kept thinking, "Hey, lady, buck up. Just do it." Now I've got this whole different perspective and I'm able to really appreciate the wonder and the struggles and this and that because we have a lot of chaos to navigate. We have a lot of extenuating circumstances, and we've got all these pre-programmed posters in our head. But at the end of the day, we can choose our own moral compass. We really can. And we can decide how we want to live our life. We can do it. But we need help, and we need help from that wise woman. And that's why I started a Facebook group, the Wise Woman Sisterhood, so that people would have a place to go to and get that support and someone to hold their hand. And if someone says, "Oh my God, Lori, I'm really worried about," I have a friend whose husband's dying of cancer and she's 2,000 miles away. And I said, "That's okay. Just put out your hand and I'll hold it." You can do that. You can hold each other's hand from thousands of miles away. But we just need to let ourselves be in that space. And you might have to do some hard stuff to get there, but you can do it. You're an overachiever and you got the grit. You've achieved all this other stuff. Why not achieve that too?
I actually think it's ironic because when you talk about the aging process, I think I'm in my mid to late 50s. And so the reality of my aging is definitely upon me, right? But at the same time, I think that if we are successful navigating this time, what you realize is that if you're lucky, as your body ages, you still have the ability to make the most out of your mind or
Huh?
that piece. Because as ironic as it seems, we would love to have wisdom and youth at the same time, right? Wouldn't that be a fantastic formula to be that wise and to be young? But yeah, it's like you have to, it's almost, and Alyssa and I are both have a psych background. And so we both are versed in inner child and everything else she talks about. But in the sense of, I think that it's by design that you can't access your wisdom until you deal with some of these hardships that are more psychologically difficult. And I don't mean the traumas, they're definitely difficult, but just you have to give up some of the artificiality that comes with society and to really be able to accept yourself before you can access that wisdom that is held away from you until you get to the point where you can see it for what it is, right? So
Exactly.
that's the challenge. And so that's to me is the irony of the situation, because even if you were wise when you were young, which you were, and I think I was as well in certain ways, people have always called me an old soul. So when you talk about reincarnation or you talk about what does that look like, how do we have that knowingness that helps us survive difficult things to get us through periods of our life. I think I shared that with you. I can't speak for Alyssa, but I don't think that wisdom, the channel to that wisdom can be available to us until we go through the different layers of that psychological hardship in many ways. And the first thing you give up is the superficiality of your age and your looks and everything else, because to get to the real you, you have to get beyond all that, right? All those layers. So I'm right with you, Lori. I feel what you're saying in a very personal way, and I appreciate that conversation.
Yeah. I think that's why when I was trying to organize my book, because I just didn't want it to be a memoir. I really wanted it to be something that would be helpful. and help make a difference for women. And so the first part is discover your essence. So I totally agree with you that it's all about learning who you are, which of course means saying, okay, this is what my gifts are, this is what my trials are, this, and then it's about learning to set boundaries and honoring yourself by being able to say no and knowing what it is you need. And then I think the other parts of discovering your essence really goes to forgiving yourself and forgiving others. So you're not carrying a lot of emotional baggage. And then you really can start working on charting your own course. But you can't really chart a real good course if you're carrying a lot of crap. It's good to lay it down.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I will say,
I was gonna
I
say,
I will
yeah,
say one of the therapists I worked with did say, when you're ready to put your burden down, then we can start working. And that was a really hard concept for me to understand because you have to feel safe to let it down. And
Right.
if you're not safe, you want it as
Right.
like a shield around you, right? In certain ways, it
Right.
protects you. And so it was very contradictory to say, okay, you got to put it down first. Because if you're going to hold it as a barrier, we're not going to be able to be successful. And so it takes
Right.
a certain amount of trust to be able to say, okay, I'm at a point in my life where I can put these things down and then we can start some work. But it's very, depending on your story and your journey, it's not easy to do that. It
No.
takes a lot of risk to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I feel I've probably been stepping into your footsteps a couple years behind you.
Oh, I'm so pleased. Because
yeah, I was
it
gonna,
really takes us to a good spot.
yeah, I was gonna just say that I think you described like where I'm at, like
Right.
finding my essence and all of that, because that feels very much so. I don't know that I'm necessarily at the very beginning of that process, but definitely what both you said, acknowledging the burdens, putting them down, being able to say, yes, this is where I'm at. And I know that I need some work. I know we think about the stages of change. Like I've acknowledged, I know what the issue is. And now it's just about building to put one foot in front of the other and find a way to overcome some of those things that have been holding us back. And so
Right.
that for me very much speaks to and where I'm at, but I also really appreciate your perspective, both of you, because I think this is probably one of the first times I've heard somebody say, as you age, there's so many benefits to that.
Oh,
We've definitely talked about it, but I think the idea of that there's so much more to look forward to as
oh,
well.
yeah.
I think that sometimes gets lost. And even just so I just turned 40 and I'm having hip problems and I'm like, oh man, like this at 40, I don't know what it's going to look like 40 years from now. But at the same time, it's okay. But again, there's so much more that I've learned in the last 40 years and being able to take that wisdom with me for the next 40 definitely gives me optimism in that journey.
Absolutely. In doing the research, too, I think there's really three main ingredients of recognizing the wise woman. And the first one is being open minded. And I have to tell, and then there's being open minded, seeking knowledge, and self reflection. And the hardest one for me is being open minded. And it shocked me
Why
to
is that the
realize,
hardest part? Why is the hardest?
you know what? Because I don't like listening to people that I don't like. I don't. I don't like listening to any news report that I find offensive. I don't read books and I don't gravitate towards sources of information that don't reaffirm what I believe. I get really happy when I read something that, oh, yeah, I was right. That's absolutely right. How oftentimes do we read something and say, oh, this is really despicable. I'm so happy I read it. We don't do that. And I like to think of myself as being really open minded. But I'll tell you what, when I lived over in Ethiopia and I had a lot of time to reflect, I realized that I had prejudices that I had no idea. They weren't the obvious kind of prejudices as far as religion or race or something like that. I've never had a problem with that. But just little habits or nuances or what have you, it would just bug the hell out of me. And I had to think about that because I didn't have anything else to do. And when I thought about it, it was like, why am I right and they're wrong? And it all goes back to that programming. It goes back to the culture in which we're raised. It's all that societal norms, all those kind of things, they really play out. And so to be open-minded, I find really a challenge. I don't have a hard time seeking knowledge. I love to learn. That's not a problem at all. And now I really like to think. So that's not a problem. But open-minded, especially right now, it gets to be a little tough.
Yeah. So I realized
Um,
that what you meant is really being open-minded, like at
Yeah,
a
not
foundational level,
right.
not just saying, oh yeah, I'm open-minded and I accept everybody and I love everybody, but really to the 100% being open-minded and listening to people who challenge your thinking and your values and the way you think life should be, being able to look at it from their perspective when really you despise them. I feel like that's a good lesson for me today.
It's really, it would shock me. And I continue to be shocked. I think that I know that I am wise. I do. I do accept that and I own the fact I am wise. But gosh, I'm not wise enough. I mean, there is a lot more wisdom to access. And that's why I think I'm so thrilled when I talk to all these extraordinary women in that, wow, that's quite incredible that you've been able to navigate that and sort it out and understand this and that and what have you. And it's fascinating. Yeah. And we're wise, we are. And what you've survived gives you the resilience to survive more. Well, if I'd come into this life in a perfect little family, what credibility would I have sitting here today? Doesn't really. The fact that, yeah, I had a mother that thought I was possessed by the devil and tried to get rid of it and didn't know what my name was. Oh my God, that's a horror story. But that gives me credibility that I might not have otherwise, right?
I don't, I want to honor your opportunity to share with our listeners how to find this wonderful book. Or how would they find you if they wanted to get a copy of your book? Or are you doing a press tour? Or tell us all about that. That's a world I know nothing about. So please share with us how that.
You and I share something there. No, this is my first time of getting into this business. You can find The Magic of Yes on just about any online bookseller. So it's on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, BAM, bookshop.org, what have you. And I would love to have you requested from a library. They might not have it yet, but for some reason, that's an ego need for me. Is I like the idea of my book being in a library.
I hear you.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We're
I
gonna say
have,
we're avid library goers, so we'll make sure our library
oh
definitely.
yeah, if I can get everybody just requested from the library, even if they don't check it out, it would thrill me.
It, right? You're
And
part of the institution.
maybe that's what it is because you become institutionalized or something. And so it's just The Magic of Yes, and you put that into Amazon, it'll come up first. And I also have a newsletter that I think is really, I like it a lot. I'm proud of it. It's called Sticky Thoughts, and it's on Substack. So once again, you can find everything if you just put in LoriPappas.com. And all the links are on my website. As far as promotion, we're actually doing a lot of podcasts and book signings and book tours. Not a lot of people, it seems like that's the older route.
Passe.
But who knows, I might do that. But I don't know. I love this. I love sitting here and talking to you ladies. I think it's just so fun. And so right now, a lot of it is podcasts. I'm on Facebook. I've got a page, The Magic of Yes. I'm trying to be on Instagram. It's not very impressive what I'm doing so far, and everything is either under the Magic of Yes or Lori Pappas. And I'd love to connect. And if somebody would like to tell their story to me, I'd love to hear it.
Okay, sounds wonderful.
And I wish you ladies the best of luck. I think what you're doing is great. And I like your podcast. I listened to several of them, and I think you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori, for that. It means a lot coming from you.
Well, I mean it. I really do. And I like the way that I liked your podcast on isolation, because that's one of the things that got me to do the Wise Woman Sisterhood Facebook group. And I'd love to have you join. I'd love to have you join. And that's probably the community where I converse the most, the easiest way to message and all the rest, because that's my baby. And I think that you are very authentic, and you're really quite fearless. You're very fearless. You're willing to share your struggles in a way that is authentic. And that is really special. It's really special. So you're doing such great work. And I'm so honored to have been able to be on your podcast.
Thank you so much. I think it's a full circle moment in the sense that for me personally, the interest to start a podcast was to be able to, for so many years, I couldn't find my voice. And so it was when I turned at this age that and I hate to say it, probably had to do with the fact that both my parents have passed and that it was a safe environment. I didn't have to justify myself or explain myself, but to be able to truly share your voice and not care what anybody thinks because it's your story and your voice. And it's time for that voice to get presence. That has been very freeing, but that also has to do with age for me. And so it took me a long time to get here. And I hope that Alyssa will find that. She has found it already because she's on the podcast with me.
But she's a baby.
She's a baby. Yeah, she is a baby. Yeah, she's a baby.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, but it's been, I really feel like this medium has allowed us access for ordinary women to be able to share their stories. And I think our goal is that people who find us, we're not marketing gurus by any stretch of the imagination. And so when people find us, it just feels like kismet or something. It just feels like it was meant to happen, and that it's exciting and it's fun and it feels magical. And this is like the perfect explanation of that, because we were so touched when we were reached out by your PR group to say, hey, would you be interested in this? And I don't know, I think I can speak for both of us. It was just like the most magical moment. Like we thought we had made it because somebody real found us and thought that we had a product that would support your book. That is like the biggest thing that's ever happened to us, Lori. It's
wow. I'll tell Kathleen. And you know what? She's an amazing woman. And there's just so many. There's so many. And I had no idea. I didn't have any idea how many there are. And I've listened to the different people that have me signed up on their podcasts. And I really honestly say I was very impressed with yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Coming from you, it means so much. Alyssa, you want to close us out?
Sure. And I'm like, how many times can we talk to Lori again? Can we bring her back?
Anytime.
Yeah.
John.
Just want to bring her back because I love her.
Oh, I want this old lady's perspective. What would Lori say?
That might be like a thing. What would Lori say? I love that.
Yeah. What would Lori say? That's what my former employees did. Once I sold my business and they tell me, they'll say, yeah, we have this thing. We'd say, what would Lori say?
I love that. I appreciate you coming on and joining us. And so again, our listeners, we thank you for joining us today. And we hope that you'll continue to listen as we have these amazing conversations between Joji and I, as well as wonderful women like Lori Pappas. So if you want to get in touch with us, we are the Deconstructed Woman podcast. You can reach us on Facebook, online, email, all of those things. But please do. We'll make sure that we have all the information in our show notes so that you can join Lori on her platforms as well. And we thank you for listening in, and we hope to talk soon.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, The Deconstructed Woman. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends, rate this episode, or subscribe to be notified of all new content. We want to hear from you, our listener. Do you have thoughts on the discussions we're having? Want to share topic suggestions? Or want to join us for a topic that you're passionate about? Contact us at our email address, thedeconstructedwoman@gmail.com.